know that Catherine is out today, so I'll be chairing without any objections. So it's 7 o'clock here at the Great Hall, Town Hall. I'd like to call the COPC meeting to order. And as usual, we will begin with our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you very much. Looks like, unfortunately, I don't have Pat Allman here this evening, so I'm going to be trying to do, I guess, triple duty between chair, vice chair, and taking notes. So please bear with me. If you're on Zoom, I know we have a number of members on Zoom this evening. If you're on Zoom, raise your hand. Hopefully I can catch that. Perhaps wrestling can help me look over my shoulder to kind of keep a monitor on that as well. I don't want to miss anybody. If not, just please speak up. First, we'll go through the roll. So, Precinct 1. Okay, no one from Precinct 1. Precinct 2.
Precinct 1 in the audience.
Precinct 1, Chris Pratt can't make it tonight. She's in Rhode Island at the meeting. She called me just to observe other town meeting member with her.
Okay, all right. Well, fantastic. If there's anything you'd like to say, please wave me down. Okay.
Invite him up. Should be sitting.
Are you vice chair or no?
Oh.
So he's just observing to make sure nothing goes awry, I guess. Precinct 2, Matt Tavares. Precinct 3, not in attendance. Precinct 4.
Precinct 4, Canary.
Precinct 5.
Kevin Lynch, sitting in for Mike Leary.
Precinct 6.
Bill Arienti.
Precinct 7.
Dave Golden, Precinct 7.
Precinct 8.
George McKay, Precinct 8.
Precinct 9, as stated earlier, Catherine Holmes is not with us this evening, and I don't believe has someone representing. Precinct 10.
Alan Costello, Precinct 10.
Precinct 11.
Precinct 11, Frank O'Brien.
Precinct 12 is Pat Allman, not here this evening. Precinct 13. Precinct 13, not here as well. Precinct 14.
Precinct 14, Tom Begley.
Thank you, Tom. Precinct 15.
Precinct 15, Wrestling Brewster.
Precinct 16.
Precinct 16, Pompey Delafield.
Precinct 17.
Precinct 17, Joe Hutchinson.
And Precinct 18.
Precinct 18, Carmen Lefrieri.
Okay. And I do believe that gives us a quorum, so we are all set there. The first item on the...
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
Pat.
Pat's here. Fantastic.
Just want to speak real quick. I happened to look over the agenda, and I was struck by the fact is down at the very bottom, there's adjournment, and then there's public comment right before the adjournment. But yet there's also old and new business right before the public comment, and yet the COP discussion on the next meeting date. I was wondering if we could amend the agenda going forward so the very last item of business before we adjourn is to discuss the next meeting date. So last item on the agenda, I'm wondering if you would be open to that, or other people. Thank you.
I'm more than happy to entertain that if there's a motion on the floor to move the discussion on the next meeting date to after public comment. So it would go town meeting handbook update, old and new business public comment, then discussion on the next meeting date if there's a motion to do so.
I'll make a motion. Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay, I think Mr. Lafriere was first for the motion, and and second by Claire Montanari. So we will go ahead and take a vote on that, and because we are hybrid, we will do it via roll. I'm going to give Pat a second to catch up here, though, if you all are willing. Yeah, Okay, ready? All right. Precinct 1, Rob is just observing, so we'll go to Precinct 2, yes. Precinct 3, still no representation. Precinct 4,
Yes.
Precinct 5,
Yes.
Precinct 6,
Yes.
Precinct 7,
Yes.
Precinct 8,
Yes.
Precinct 9, absent. Precinct 10,
Precinct 10, yes.
Precinct 11,
Precinct 11, yes.
Precinct 12,
Yes.
Precinct 13,
Yes.
Precinct 14,
Yes.
Precinct 15,
Yes.
Precinct 16,
Yes.
Precinct 17,
Yes.
and Precinct 18.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, to get into our first item here, we're going to continue the discussion that we started last month regarding impact fees on development projects here in the town of Plymouth. Where we left it as of the last meeting, that's why we're here earlier in January than just our normal end-of-the-month meeting. At that time, Mr. Arienti was going to kind of reach out to different departments within the town. I believe he's done so, and I thought that we'd start with a little update from Mr. Arienti, and then I have some other members that I have scheduled to speak that I see joining us on Zoom. So, Mr. Arienti, I'm going to let you go ahead first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last month, I brought up the proposal of impact fees in the town of Plymouth. The reason I did so was because Plymouth is growing in leaps and bounds, and we have to really be smart about what we're doing. The one thing that's happening a lot is we're seeing developments going in, and we're seeing items that the developments are causing being paid for by the current taxpayers of the town. The developers are reaping in a wonderful profit, yet they're not putting in some of the things that to fix the problems that they're creating, or situations that they're creating. For this reason, I put this idea up, and I was asked to speak with members of the Planning Department and Planning Board, which I did. I spoke with Lee Hartman. I had a great meeting with both Lee Hartman and then a separate meeting with Steve Bulletin. Both were extremely helpful in identifying the problems, identifying some of the solutions, and trying to put this town, the needs of this town, on the front burner. We have a lot going on. We're understandable with the master plan and everything, and they have a lot to be looking over. The impact fees were on their agenda as item number 4 after they get through a lot of the other stuff. But they did explain that there are some major drawbacks with impact fees as well, especially with 40B. 40B has become a weapon for the developers against cities and towns in Massachusetts. And it's been allowed to, and initially it was worked to be implemented once a municipality and a developer came to loggerheads. They would go to the state for 40B. The state would then say, okay, well, you agreed to this much. We'll let you have the community have this much, and the developer, you can do the rest of it without any more additions. Now it's somebody buys a piece of land and, oh, I'm going to make it 40B right away, goes right into the state, applies for 40B, and they're able to build whatever they want without the town's jurisdiction, without the town's input, or little of the town input. This isn't fair, and this is happening all over the state. And one of the things I spoken with Mr. Bolton about was the fact that maybe we should be talking to our legislators, as the city of Boston and the city of Springfield are the two main benefactors of the 40B movement. Other cities and towns are putting up with 40B, and it's not that we want to stop affordable housing in our community, just the opposite. We just want a say on the building practices and the items that are created by this to be paid for by people who have an interest in it rather than people who have lived in this town their whole lives and have no reason to be paying for it. So Steve told me that basically the way that the governor and the legislature is standing right now, that it's not going to go through, as they have strengthened the 40B laws rather than relaxed them for cities and towns. And now even with the MBTA districts, it's even getting to be harder for municipalities. The good thing that I picked up during these meetings were our planning department and our planning board are taking efforts. They're thinking out of the box to make sure something gets done to help the people of Plymouth. This is what we're here for. We were elected as town meeting members and COPC members to help the people of Plymouth. And I think that we have to do things maybe out of the box, maybe things that are brand new, to at least offer some assistance to the people of this town. So my idea with the impact fees may not be feasible at this time. But again, with Steve and with Lee Hartman having some ideas to push something forward, I think that we're in good hands. I think we just have to work together very hard to make something like this happen.
Thank you, Mr. Arianti. I commend you on kind of picking up a ball and getting it moving, and whether it's impact fees, which may not be feasible, or I commend you for moving something forward and starting the conversation of looking outside the box. With that being said, I was hoping that Mr. Bulletin could add some color to some of the items that they're looking at outside of the box as far as the planning committee goes. And then after Mr. Bulletin, I was hoping to speak with Mr. Hartman to kind of, if you could add kind of your thoughts as well, being the Director of Planning and Development. So, Mr. Bulletin.
Thank you, Mr. Torres. And I do want to follow up with what you said. I had a very good conversation with Mr. Arianti, who had a lot of good thoughts and a lot of passion for the issue. And he's right. Plymouth, as with many other towns, is being subjected to a loss of control of some of our critical planning functions by the state. It is a challenge to us, whether it is the MBTA communities law, the 40B laws, and other expected challenges that we're going to see with the state's dedication to imposing a requirement that we simply build more housing, period. As Mr. Arianti said very cogently, it's not about affordable housing. The MBTA communities law actually is a disincentive to affordable housing. On top of that, 40B, while calling itself an affordable housing law, we've all known, doesn't build affordable housing. It builds slightly less expensive, overpriced housing. There are very limited ways in which we can challenge that. But one idea that has been presented, and it's one that I've talked about in general strokes, broad brush, in the past, has been the idea of a land bank. And it's something that a number of us in town, and again, I'm not speaking on behalf of the planning board here at the moment, because that's not a planning board initiative per se, but it's an initiative by myself, some members of the select board and some town officials as well as some private individuals who have been helping us in trying to craft legislation that would, in essence, accomplish many of the things we would look to get if we were able to legally do impact fees, which we're not. Our goal is to have a draft of the legislation in reasonably soon fashion for people to start looking and commenting on. It's not going to be something that we're just going to simply present and say, oh, here it is, town meeting, vote on it. It's something that needs to be vetted further, and it will be. Our hope would be to possibly get it on the warrant for the fall town meeting, to give us plenty of time to discuss it and to come up with the best possible legislation that we can. Now, one of the pluses that we have with respect to the idea of a land bank as opposed to impact fees is, first of all, it's already been done. Both Nantucket and the Vineyard have land banks, and the Cape was granted a land bank opportunity as well, slightly different than the ones on the islands, but that still was created by the state legislature. So it's something for which there's precedent. Additionally, we have already spoken with our state delegation, and all of them have been unanimously in support of this. Obviously, we'll be having elections and there will be new people potentially, but we need to work with everyone and see if we can continue to do that. But it's an idea that has a lot of support because it accomplishes what we want, but it also accomplishes what the state is looking for. The state is looking for us to do environmental protection. This is designed to do that. The state is encouraging us to build more affordable housing, and this is something that we're drafting in a unique fashion, a true Plymouth land bank that is, as Mr. Arienti says, a bit out of the box. It's something that we think is a bit more of a creative way to address the issues while at the same time preserving the issues we have for Plymouth and protecting our taxpayers from a lot of the growing increases that we see each year, particularly when it comes to the cost of land. When our need for land arises, whether that be for municipal use, for wells, or our desire to preserve open space to protect our aquifer, it costs us more each year. And if we can come up with revenue sources to do it now or during dips in the real estate market, all the better for the residents of Plymouth. So that's something that we will be bringing forward. The CPC is going to be, the COPC will certainly be a large part of that as we present this, because we're going to want your input. We're going to want your thoughts, your creativity, as we address what is going to be an uphill battle. I agree with Mr. Arienti. I don't think that there is any chance whatsoever of pushing an impact fee special legislation through the State House. I do believe, uphill battle as it may be, we have a good chance for a properly crafted land bank to get approval. So with that, I thank you for the opportunity to speak. Of course, happy to answer any questions and look forward to working with all of you to advance this important piece of legislation for Plymouth.
Thank you, Mr. Bulletin. Mr. Hartman, do you have anything you want to kind of tack on to Mr. Bulletin, Mr. Arienti's statements?
Sure, just a few things. So as you know, we are in the process of updating, or we will be starting the process of updating the master plan for the town. So again, I think impact fees can be visited and discussed and get some professional guidance from the consultants we hire to look at impact fees as part of that process. So I don't want to just say we're just immediately saying that that's something that has no merit. But again, I think this will be a great opportunity through the master plan to look at it. Then the only other comment I want to make is it's not like we do not negotiate for those off-site improvements. So if you think of Red Brook, the signalization at Clark Road and Long Pond Road, signalization at Halfway Pond Road, which will hopefully be Halfway Pond Road and Long Pond Road, which will hopefully be going on soon. The improvements to the intersection of Long Pond Road and Ship Pond Road. Right now, we're in discussions with Pine Hills for the signalization improvements on Clark Road. There were extensive mitigation requirements for many of the developments up in the industrial park, mainly focused on water mitigation, but again, water and wastewater upgrades. But again, it's not like we don't try to negotiate improvements and have developers pay for impacts already. I think that's something the town has always been pretty aggressive on and will continue to be aggressive with. I think that's all I need to add at this point. Everything else I think was covered.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hartman. Mr. Golden, I see that you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I know that Mr. Brindisi is here and he was on the agenda, so I don't want to preempt him. Do you want to see if he has anything before I speak?
Mr. Brindisi, did you have anything to add regarding?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add regarding this subject. I think Mr. Hartman and Mr. Bolton have covered it all, especially from a planning board perspective. I think this certainly will be led by the planning board more so than by the select board.
All right, Mr. Golden.
Thanks, Matt. And I want to thank the staff for being here tonight too, and Mr. Bolton. I think it sounds to me like we are moving in a direction as a town where some members of the staff, the planning board, and some other elected officials have this issue in hand. I know last month the COPC voted to pursue impact fees, and I'm wondering if, given what we've heard here tonight, we ought to motion to vacate that vote. It seems like the other actors that I've named seem to have this in mind.
I await the pleasure of the committee on that. If Ms. Adelman had one thing to add, and then I'll wait to see if we get a motion.
First of all, I'd like the land bank to be explained. And the other comment I had is I understood we wouldn't implement the impact fees for the legislation that we sent to the State House, but only asking for permission. And then you would have to have a study for each individual development to, assess what the impact would be. And one of the comments I read when I was researching this, and I wish I had written it down, but I think it was called the Massachusetts Developers Association. There was an opinion that it would be better to have impact fees instead of the unpredictability of, putting demands on the developer. And it would also, this is my opinion, not the association's opinion, I also think it would shed sunlight on the negotiations. Like in Claremont, it was executive session, and then they came out and said they were going to, I can't remember the millions of dollars, they were going to agree to put that extra water pump. If we had an impact fee, it would be very clear, and there wouldn't be backroom negotiations. But that's all. Thank you.
I guess I'm going to defer to Mr. Hartman or Mr. Sorry, my mic wasn't on. I guess I'm going to defer to Mr. Hartman or Mr. Brindisi to answer. There were a few questions there, but whoever wants to start out.
So I'll start out by not answering the impact fee questions. That's more in Mr. Hartman's lane. But I just wanted to kind of clarify the Claremont agreement, although it was negotiated in executive session, much like the American Cruise Line Agreement or the Holtec Agreement. There's a reason why the statute allows for executive session, as you all know. It allows us to not have to give up our negotiating position. And by doing that, you must do that in private session. Could you imagine trying to negotiate a Holtec agreement in the public view? We would not have been as successful as we were at town meeting if we had done that. So the board will always continue to negotiate in executive session and did well at Claremont. And so just so it's clear to Ms. Adelman, all of the negotiated agreements are presented in open session once they've been ratified by the select board in executive session. So as it relates to the Claremont agreement, that agreement was discussed on 2 different occasions in public session. And so there was no secrecy. The board was fully transparent behind that, and we will continue to be moving forward with any other future negotiations. Thank you.
I want to see if Mr. Hartman can answer a couple of your questions before we come back to you.
I think, the thought of just filing the legislation and seeing what happens. First of all, again, every indication, as Steve Bolton pointed out, that the likelihood of success is pretty minimal. Second of all, I think we need to have a better discussion as a community about this impact fee, because let's just say it gets approved. There's a whole range of reasons and implications. How do we apply this? Is it on commercial development? Is it on industrial development? Will that have a negative effect? Do we apply it in residential areas, and will that just encourage developers to do 40Bs? So I think it's not just as simple as filing legislation. I think there's a bigger discussion the community has to say before we say, yes, we want to do this, and have at least some thought process as a community about how you want to apply an impact fee in the community. I don't think it's as simple as just filing legislation.
Ms. Allen, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I just, to Mr. Brindisi, my point was that before an impact fee is established, there would be studies, so it wouldn't be a surprise that in order to build Claremont, we would need more water. That cause and effect would be pointed out before the development made plans. Thank you.
Mr. Hutchinson. Oh, Mr. Delaville, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that Pat asked this. I'm very interested, although I think I know the answer, the clarification of what is a land bank. If we could get a definition, I think it would be very helpful.
Thank you.
Sure. Steve, do you want to handle that, since it seems to be your favorite word?
Sure. I'll put it in as brief a fashion as I possibly can, because I could probably take up 2 or 3 of your meetings with discussing the land bank. But the land bank, as defined by the current legislation, the active legislation, which is on Nantucket and on the Vineyard, is an entity. It is a quasi-governmental entity which gains revenues based upon transfer fees in real estate paid for by buyers, which is then applied to the defined uses for the land bank. So the land bank that we are proposing as a general matter is one that would allow for those monies that are submitted to the land bank and property that can be donated to the land bank to be used for open space, municipal use, recreational space, and affordable housing. Those are the 4 areas that we feel a land bank can be of benefit to Plymouth. So the goal would be to create this entity which gets revenues each time property is transferred. The advantage to this over, say, something like an impact fee is, say, hypothetically, a developer comes into town. Developer purchases a piece of property. The town would get a land bank fee for that. The developer then develops the property into subparcels. Each time those parcels are sold, the town gets revenue to the land bank. And then each time those are sold on again in the future, the town gets revenue for the land bank. And the land bank can then use that money to purchase open space when that becomes available, which we believe is essential for our aquifer protection. It can use it to buy property that we think is of value for municipal use. Imagine if we could purchase property that we know is going to be useful for a future well, or in an area where there's development, we know there's going to be a fire station or a school needed in the future. Imagine being able to take the money and use it to purchase property when the property is available, or certainly when it's less expensive, and hold it rather than worry about having to purchase it when we need it, when it's almost always more expensive for us to deal with. So That's the short version. There are, of course, myriad exceptions that we're working on to preserve the ability of people to actually continue to afford to live here. I've described this as being essentially the price of buying into the community of Plymouth. Thinking of Plymouth as something that people who are going to come here, if you're going to move to Plymouth, the goal is to say, listen, we're a wonderful community and we want to preserve our community. And this is one of those costs associated with buying into our community, as opposed to your taxes, which go to maintain our community. So that's the short version of it. But again, I'm happy to discuss this at length with anybody who wants to contact me and get involved. I hope I've answered your question.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bulletin. Mr. Hutchinson, you had your hand raised earlier. Do you still have a question? Or?
I had questions about land that the town currently holds and how that might fit into such a plan.
Well, that's something we can certainly talk about with the town. Again, if we create a land bank, the bank is in essence independent of the town. There will be an independent land bank commission, board of trustees. However, it's legally structured. So it moves independently in a lot of ways from the town. Its funding comes through this transfer fee. It is not, unlike the CPC, it's not going to be borrowing unless there is an agreement by the town to give full faith and credit. And that is something that, again, we're looking at as a potential, but it would still operate in that instance through town meeting, would have to approve anything like that. But the idea is to create an opportunity to have a slightly more independent use of our property as opposed to, for example, CPC. CPC is restricted based upon state law as to what it can do when it purchases property and what it can spend its money on. There's percentages that are required and there are restrictions on what they can do. The goal of the land bank is not to have those same restrictions. It's to make it more Plymouth friendly as opposed to the typical state one size fits all. That's why it was so popular on Nantucket and so popular on the Vineyard. We're just looking to make it a little bit more unique for Plymouth because where they have a unique singular goal, which is just simply to purchase open space because they're trying to keep it from development, we have other needs and uses as well for our real estate and our property and our land. And so we want to make sure that it's available for multiple uses so as to give a benefit to the taxpayers on an ongoing basis.
I think I want to kind of caution's the wrong word, but with the committee here is to just, before we go down a number of questions regarding land banks and what we're going to do, I just want to say that as was proposed and spoken about with Mr. Hartman and Mr. Bulletin, this is one of the ideas that the Planning and Development Committee is looking at. So I don't think that if we go too far down the line here of questioning, this is Mr. Bulletin's taking time out to speak to us, probably not as a member of the planning board, but kind of as a general idea of what's going on there. So I just want to make sure that we're all aware of this is not something that they're putting forward yet. It's something that's possibly going to be discussed. So, yeah, Mr. Hutchinson, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just as a suggestion, Mass Development used to be the Massachusetts Land Bank. And what they grew into was a scheme not unlike what you're talking about, but also something that used to maintain areas for development that the Commonwealth already owned. And they also grew into what they think of as a fast permitting process that stood the Commonwealth in very good stead. And I would, just put that out there as something to think about in the model that you're building.
Okay. I just also want to make sure that we're staying on. Thank you, Mr. Hutchinson. Staying on the idea of the agenda item was regards to authority to implement impact fees. So I just want to kind of keep our questions towards that and the topic steering towards that. Mr. Lynch, I saw you had a hand. You're all set. Okay. Are there any other comments from the Committee of Precinct Chairs? Mr. Arienti, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Golden had asked if we should vacate. I don't believe that vacating this would be proper. I think that holding this in abeyance within the committee would probably be the best interest of the committee. If it ever does come up that we can use it, it's already been brought up. It's already under old business, so we can easily bring it right back up again. If we vacate it, we have to start right from scratch again. So I disagree that we should vacate this proposal.
Okay, Mr. Golden, I see your hand is raised. Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Matt. The motion as it reads in our minutes indicates that we have this motion in place in order to pursue an article for the special town meeting in the spring. So I would perhaps, I don't have the date in front of me. I think it's fast approaching, though. The date to submit articles for the special town meeting. Does anyone know that offhand?
February 2nd.
Yeah, so we have one more meeting between now and then that's scheduled, although we're talking about whether or not we will cancel that meeting here tonight. So I'm not sure that, I guess perhaps it'll become a moot point after this discussion, but I think we've demonstrated that we're not prepared as a committee to advance any kind of article. We still have a lot of questions, and we still have not, to this point, had a presentation concerning impact fees. I haven't received any of the information that I requested at our last meeting, so I'm not sure that keeping this motion on the books makes sense.
Any other discussion? Normally, since you're a town meeting member, Mr. Cirque, if you'd like to come up and speak, please make sure your light is on, and if you could keep it brief, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It may help to understand the relationship between the CPA fee that we pay with our tax bills on the one hand and the way a land bank operates on the other hand. Right now, we pay a certain percentage toward the Community Preservation Act. Everyone pays that as part of their tax bill. The land bank fee would be paid by the sellers of real estate. And so it would be paid by a subset of the entire class of taxpayers in the town. I'm not advocating here, I'm just explaining. So, and it would not only result in a fee in the event that someone is selling property and moving out of town and an out-of-town buyer is buying into Plymouth. It would apply when, in most instances, as I understand it, would apply to any sale, whether you're selling to a Plymouth buyer or someone out of town. So, and it's similar, the purposes for which the money would be allocated is very similar to the CPC, but without the mandatory percentages that the Community Preservation Act requires. And I think the municipal purposes, I think that's absent from the CPC, isn't it, Steve?
That's correct.
Okay. So I just wanted to clarify that because there was a question about how the money in the land bank would be collected. And it would be on top of the CPC fee that all taxpayers pay. This is an additional fee, and it's paid by the seller, but as part of the negotiation of a purchase and sale agreement, it might end up being paid for by the buyer, but it has to be paid at the time of any real estate transaction. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Mr. Cirque. Before I get to Mr. Bolton, I just do want to remind the committee that we do have this voted on motion to, as Mr. Golden alluded to move forward for the special Springtown meeting, working on an article for impact fees. So I just want to make sure that we're bearing that in mind, that there is that motion that's still out there and was voted on to move forward on this. like Mr. Golden pointed out, we are up against the timeline on that, so we may have to revisit either the wording of that motion, but I await the pleasure of the committee. But go ahead, Mr. Bolton.
Thank you, Mr. Tavares. First, just a quick clarification. Impact fees notwithstanding, the land bank legislation, as adopted by both the Vineyard and Nantucket, requires that the buyer be the payer of the impact fee. It's not a negotiation matter. It's actually a statutory matter. It's a part of the law. But the reason that I raised the land bank was because given the COPC's motion to pursue an impact fee coming up at the Springtown meeting, our concern was that if we started down that road, it has the potential to adversely affect our efforts to undergo a land bank piece of legislation. What I hope does not happen is that we end up spending a lot of time and effort pursuing what, again, in my opinion, and I think documented well by others, though, is a highly unlikely, and I'll say that that's the nicest way I could put it, chance of passing an impact fee. We are up against a state government that will do anything and everything it can to prevent us from restricting residential development. That's an absolutely stated plan, period. They've said it. We are not going to allow anything that will restrict residential development, just the opposite. We are cutting restrictions on residential development. If we go ahead and try and pass an impact fee unsuccessfully and then go back with the land bank, that land bank is going to get double and triple scrutiny as being an effort to circumvent the state, rather than what we're hoping to really express it as a means to protect Plymouth's aquifer and advance the cause of affordable housing here in Plymouth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bolton. Mr. Brewster and then Mr. Golden.
Yes, I would suggest that we table the motion until future meetings. I think that we haven't got our stuff together for putting it in the Springtown meeting, that possibly after Springtown meeting we could bring it back. But I would move that we table for now the motion.
So there's a motion by Mr. Brewster to table the current motion on impact fees. I did hear a second. I'm sorry. Mr. Arienti seconded. Discussion? Mr. Golden, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Matt. Would you accept a friendly amendment to table it until after the Springtown meeting?
Sure, I would amend my motion to table the motion on the floor till after Springtown meeting and bring it back after Springtown meeting.
So I need a second on the amended, and Mrs. Montanari beat you that time. So now discussion on the amended motion. Go ahead.
Just for clarification, you said a short time ago that Mr. Golden's motion was seconded. Who seconded his motion?
He didn't have a motion. Mr. Brewster had a motion. He was suggesting that he make a motion, but he never made the motion.
Oh, I apologize. I thought you said it was motion and seconded. Thank you.
No. Mr. Golden, you still have your hand up. We are in discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. The only thing I'll add, and I'll stop talking here tonight for a little while, is that I spoke with Matt Muratori, and the state estimates that we're behind about 200,000 units in terms of housing in Massachusetts. Even with the governor's aggressive housing plan coming forward, they anticipate only picking up another 70 to 80,000 units. Mr. Muratori so that I could share this information with the COPC and his opinion that this could be considered hostile to the goals of the state, which are to aggressively pursue more housing. So, I worry that if we spend a lot more time on this, we're going to be wasting time on the COPC. So I'm in full support of this motion, and I hope in the future we pursue other avenues in conjunction with some of the other actors in town.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, I'm going to call the roll for a vote on Mr. Brewster's amendment, or excuse me, amended motion. All right, starting with Precinct 1, not present. Precinct 2, yes. Precinct 3, yes. Precinct 4,
Yes.
Precinct 5,
Yes.
Precinct 6,
Yes.
Precinct 7,
Yes.
Precinct 8,
Yes.
Precinct 9, not present. Precinct 10,
I'm going to abstain. Precinct 10.
Precinct 11,
Precinct 11, yes.
Precinct 12,
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Precinct 13,
Yes.
Precinct 14,
Yes.
Precinct 15,
Yep.
Precinct 16,
Yes.
Precinct 17,
Yes.
and Precinct 18.
Yes.
I believe the motion carries. Okay. All right, thank you, everyone. So, to be continued. The next item on our agenda is the COPC representation for the Master Plan Committee discussion and possibly a nomination. There were some questions the last time we discussed this in December as to time commitment and when things might happen. Myself and Catherine were able to reach out to Mr. Hartman, and he got back to us very quickly, so I appreciate that. Just to give the members here the opportunity to think about it yet again, it is a 2-year commitment. I think the biggest question was out of this body was when would the meetings be held, if it was town hall hours or in the evenings. The long and short of that is once the Master Plan Committee is formed, they will determine that. So as a body. So you would have some input on that if you decided to sit on the Master Plan Committee. But I believe, Mr. Hartman, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and if you'd like to chime in as well, that, it would be anticipated that it would be in the evening. But Mr. Hartman, did you have any color that you wanted to kind of add to that?
I would just say that was the preference from the discussion that the planning board had. So the planning board thought that might be more appropriate. But again, I think that's up to the committee. And once we create a committee like this, the first thing we do is try to figure out what's the best time for the members and where we can get the best attendance. So again, I think there might be a preference for an evening meeting, but that will be up to the committee. I don't know, Steve, if you have anything to add.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yes, thank you. One of the thought processes that has been discussed, and it's been discussed with a couple of the people who've already been designated, but obviously no decisions made. But one of the thought processes was that not only would the meetings be principally held live as in person, not that there wouldn't be a Zoom component, there would be, but the goal is to have most of the meetings held in person, not to mention also holding meetings in various places around town. So while probably most meetings would principally be taking place at Town Hall, there would be roadshow meetings all throughout town. Again, the whole purpose of the master plan is to get the input of all of the residents. And the best way to do that is to go out to the residents, not make the residents come to us. So the hope would be that we would be able to come up with some form of a schedule that would allow for meetings at, if not the same time, but even varying times, but certainly at different locations throughout town on a fairly regular basis to get as much participation from the community as possible.
Okay, so with that, I believe we are looking for either volunteers or nominations for those. I'd prefer to see some nominations for representation to the Master Plan Committee from the COPC. And a hush falls over the crowd. Okay. Ms. Adelman.
I thought Tom Begley originally. Did he change his mind?
Tom, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I did change my mind. Only not out of interest, but more out of practicality right now. I'll get the next one.
So that being said, I believe the other person that was interested was you, Pat, as well, or is there anyone else that would be of interest? Go ahead, Pat, and I'll let you finish.
Well, I will defer if somebody else wants it. If not,
Mr.
I
Hutchinson,
will
would
do
you
it.
like to add some color to this, please?
I recently submitted an application to the committee, so and I'm here, at least for now.
And that was for a member-at-large position?
Yes.
Was originally?
Right, but I'm not sure if Mr. Bulletin, how many people are going to be on the committee? And do you need both?
It's 9.
Do you need more at-large people?
It's a total of 9, but I would suggest that the planning board's practice has been to not have multiple members from any one of the bodies designating a member. I can only speak for myself on that, but my understanding would be, so I'd say, Joe, if you want to be on the committee, and since you're a COPC member, I think you would be a very good choice for the COPC to send to the master plan committee.
Before we start, rallying for people, Mr. Golden, do you have a comment?
I nominate Joe Hutchinson to serve as the COPC representative to the master plan.
So I have a nomination from Mr. Golden for Mr. Hutchinson, and the second was from Mr. Arienti. Do we have any other nominations?
Can we?
No, I was deferring. So I'm fine with Joe. I was hoping we'd get the younger generation to volunteer.
Well,
I
wait a
mean,
minute.
that's
Okay.
why I was pushing for Tom Begley.
Tom, you let Pat down. Okay, so not seeing any other nominations, I'd like to close nominations. Do I need discussion on the nominations? Joe, do you want to advocate for yourself?
Well, I mean, I can just say that I've worked on a steering committee like the one that Steve has led over the past couple of years. I also managed the development of a master plan for a small town in north central Massachusetts, which is not nearly as big as Plymouth, but the tasks are pretty much the same. And so I have experience at it, and I have an interest in, developing the best master plan that we could develop for Plymouth, because we face enormous challenges over the next decade. Well, I could go on, but enough said.
I think when you're running against yourself, less is more.
Yeah,
So that
thank
being
you.
said, I'd like to call the roll for the nomination of Mr. Hutchinson as the COPC representation for the Master Plan Committee. Precinct 1 is absent. Precinct 2, yes. Precinct 3, yes. Precinct 4,
Yes.
Precinct 5,
Yes.
Precinct 6,
Yes.
Precinct 7,
Yes.
Precinct 8,
Yes.
Precinct 9, absent. Precinct 10,
Precinct 10, yes.
Precinct 11,
Precinct 11, yes.
Precinct 12.
Precinct 12, yes.
Precinct 13.
Precinct 13, yes.
Precinct 14.
Yes.
Precinct 15.
Thank you for stepping up, Mr. Hutchinson. Yes.
Precinct 16.
Enthusiastically, yes.
Precinct 17.
I'm going to abstain.
Precinct 18.
Yes.
Congratulations, Mr. Hutchinson. You have now taken on yet another role here in town. Precinct 17 is Joe Hutchinson, and he abstained.
Oh, okay. Of course.
Okay. Moving on, the next, Mr. Brindisi, if you could possibly give us a update as to the COP administrative support position.
Sure. Thank you. So we started to advertise this position back in late December. We've had a couple applicants, but as I had pointed out in previous presentations regarding this position, it's a very challenging time to recruit and retain public employees. And so it's not uncommon that we only have a handful of applicants. So but we do have couple good applicants. So right now we are in the process of setting up interview schedules with some of these applicants. This is a full-time position, as I talked a lot about at town meeting, that will be shared with the Community Preservation Committee. In addition to that, this position is going to be embedded in the Finance Department and report directly to Lynn Barra, our Finance Director.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brindisi. I'm sure you'll keep us well informed, and I'm sure Catherine will be on top of you looking for some administrative help soon. So let us know how we can assist in your search if needed. Appreciate the update.
Great, thank you.
I'd like to move along to what's going to be Article 21 in the spring town meeting. This is the solar bylaw. I believe Mr. Pacheco is here to present on an update to what we saw originally in this past fall town meeting. Mr. Pacheco, the floor is yours.
Good evening. Mark Pacheco, my associate Tim Angley. We came before you with a solar bylaw article in the fall town meeting, and we lost by 3 votes. So at first you don't succeed, try again, or quit while you're ahead, one or the other. We'll see what happens. I'm going to wait for everybody to get this. So it's just as a quick overview. This does largely what the last one did. It's just the wording's a little cleaner, might actually be stronger, but it's more to the point, and I think it's going to be agreeable to most folks. So to start with, looking at the overall intent of the bylaw, the part that's highlighted in yellow for you folks at the top, the intent of the bylaw is to promote by right, subject to site plan review, yada, yada, yada. Going down and looking at minimizing the impacts of solar facilities on the character of neighborhoods, on property values, on the scenic, historic, and environmental resources of the town, protect health and safety. That's the key that we're going to use for the rest of our amendment. Language that's already in the bylaw. So the first thing we want to look at is the financial surety. That's the bond issue. When we were looking at this the second time around, we kind of looked at it that, as it stands right now, anything over 2 megawatts needs a bond. Well, that doesn't really make any sense because megawatts is tied to the technology used, and that changes. In 10 years, 2 megawatts could be something the size of this room that would need a bond. In 20 years, it could be something you put it on the roof of your car. So 2 megawatts for a bond, it makes sense. So we changed that to size, because that's what we're really worried about here, right? That you've got an out-of-state company, and they put up 5 acres or so, 4 acres or so of a solar array, and something happens and they just abandon it. So we landed on 4 acres. That's in talking with the folks at the planning office. That's just thinking around, how many acres Is it so that it's not, you're not putting any financial burden on an applicant versus what they should be responsible for? And so everyone can visualize 4 acres, that's a Walmart supercenter. That's the average size of a Walmart supercenter. So that's what we're looking at. So anything over that would need to put up a bond. Next piece, notification. We had, first time around, hoped that with notification we could change it, and we talked a lot about why. We've decided to kind of step back off of that. And we're hoping this starts a conversation. But what we're saying here now is, in consultation with planning, have come forth with language wherein we add a section, Section 1, in order to minimize impacts, as in part of the intent of this bylaw. The town encourages the notification of operators to any residential neighbors for whom a installation will create an undue impact. So we're asking developers to do the right thing. So we're going to start a conversation here about whether or not notification should change. I think that's something the town should do. But we're not asking to do it here. We're simply asking to put this language in to make it clear to developers that we're serious about protecting the residents as much as we are about putting in solar. The last step of this is a section we're calling standards and conditions. So this is where we go back to that first section I talked about. When site plan review is required, exempting the municipality, which it should be, or any proposal to cover a parking lot, which is something the town is encouraging folks to do right now, and we agree, should be over parking lots. An applicant shall present to the town for planning board review and recommendation a stamped engineered plan which includes screening as defined by 2013 of the bylaw, which accomplishes the goal of largely minimizing the impacts of solar facilities on surrounding residential properties. The impacts are the same things that are already outlined. We're not saying you have to screen it completely. We're not saying minimize the visual. No, just minimize the impacts that are already laid out by the bylaw itself and use the screening that's already laid out in the bylaw itself. We're taking these two sections, marrying them together in a section, and putting the onus on the developer to make sure it happens. So after that, it says, as determined by the planning board, following the input of inspectional services, said residential properties shall be defined as those more likely than not to be impacted. Why is that in there? Well, not every residents are really going to be impacted. There may not be an impact in this case. It could be on the other side of a hill. So we want to make sure that, again, we're not putting undue burden on the applicant, but we're protecting residents. So we're trying to make sure that this process is done in a way that helps the town move forward with solar, but at the same time protects residents. Lastly, the planning board may waive the provision. You know, there could be an instance where it's only one house that's affected. That guy doesn't care. He's never there, he or she. And they simply say, you know what, don't worry about it. You don't have to do anything with it. So that's in there for that reason. Lastly, the planning board shall make a recommendation, meaning the planning board can't just throw it to the building department. They've got to actually make a recommendation on those stamped plans for screening. And lastly is the severability section that we were asked to put in last time. Just to let you know, we have been talked to planning, and hopefully at some point a severability clause will be added to the entire bylaw. But for the meantime, anything that comes forward should have its own clause. That's that.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Attorney Tim Angley. I just wanted to add one tiny bit regarding the financial sureties. I know that at town meeting, there was some concern that the language there would maybe impact residential owners who wanted to put up, say, a pole, some of the new technology, whatever. We just wanted to point out that the planning board can set a surety at 0 if they want to. So we don't want this to be something that people are going to say, well, how is this going to affect, my mother who wants to put a little array on our property, which is why we went to size, but also keeping in mind that if this is a project that we think is going to be a real potential problem down the road. It could be set as a good size surety. If it's something that's not going to, we don't think is going to be an issue, the planning board could set it to something that's $0 or $100 or whatever, just as an example. So this shouldn't be an impediment to saying this is going to become a burden to the average homeowner down the road. And as Mr. Pacheco had said, as we don't know what the technology is going to be down the road and how efficient things may become, we want to make sure that it is still within the board to be able to say, that installation is fine, you don't need to worry about it, we don't need a surety on a bond or anything like that to take care of it later on. And so, thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Ms. Allen?
Did you present this before the planning board yet?
Not to the planning board yet, nor the Board of Selectmen. However, we did go to the Energy Committee. We got unanimous approval this time. So, and I have the letter right there.
And you took out that language about view shed?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
What we were trying to do with that basically was to ensure that people understood that we were talking about if there's nothing between me and you, you have to put something out. That was confusing for a lot of folks, and that's why we took the existing language from the intent of the bylaw and said, we'll just use that, because it does the same thing we wanted anyway.
Thank you.
I'm going to go Mr. Costello and then Mr. Golden.
Yeah, I just had two quick questions. Back to financial surety. Concerns me a little bit that you're leaving it up to discretion of the building commissioner. He can say to one applicant, they have a financial commitment, and then to the next, they don't.
That's not
So can you
us.
standardize this?
Well, what we're doing now is right now it's based on 2 megawatts or above, and we're
Right.
changing it. However, the planning board, by town bylaw, or can set it for whatever they want. That's not something that's within our purview what we're doing.
So the existing bylaw
existing
states
same
this,
thing.
basically?
Yeah, they can still do
And
the
then,
same thing.
and the second thing, and again, as a legal thing, is a word on number 1 on the next page. The word encourages. You can't possibly use that word encourages, can you?
Yeah.
You gonna go with that?
Well, that was actually in working with Mr. Farah and the planning department. We wanted to try to come up with a way that we were encouraging developers to kind of do the right thing. This has no legal bound in this section. As a lot of people remember, we had originally wanted to change the notification to 700 feet. And we thought we had pretty good reasons, I still believe we do, that if it's something that's that large from 700 feet, you should be notified. However, it would be the only thing in town that was granted that. And so in this case, we came up with the idea of, okay, by saying we encourage it, we're saying to the town, to the developers, we're serious. Do the right thing. And a developer that wants to be a part of the community will do the right thing. And the one that won't, that's the guy you probably have to look at a little closer scrutiny during site plan review.
But it doesn't preclude that from going forward with the project.
No, but they can, well, no, all it does is, so let's say Matt's within 300 feet, I have to notify him. You guys aren't, but there's a clear line of sight. The bylaw is encouraging me to notify you of the project as well. I don't have to. But if I want to be a good developer and I want to follow the letter and intent of the bylaw, I will. At least I should.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
I was just going to say, one extra thing was, these types of projects are allowed by right per state regulations. And so that's one of the problems here, is that we as a town can't say, no, we don't like a field of solar in everyone's view. We don't really have a choice in the matter. So all we're trying to do is minimize those impacts on you driving by, you living, across the street from it. So we can't prohibit it. And if we tried to, it would be struck down by the AG's office. So we're trying to work together, and let's try and have a dialogue, like Mr. Pacheco said. You guys should notify more than just the immediate circle. Kind of let everyone know that this is going on, and have a say, and hopefully we can come up with good projects, not unfortunate projects.
All right, fair enough, thank you.
Mr. Golden.
Unfortunately.
Thanks, Matt. First, I want to say to the presenters, I appreciate that you tightened up the financial surety section. I do think that what came before us in the fall was it was overly broad and not could cause some discomfort for individual property owners as they try to implement solar on their property. So kudos on that. I do share some concerns that Alan and Pat have both brought up. In terms of, well, I guess in general, not just in section 1, but it seems to me that a lot of the new language is weak, wishy-washy, for lack of a better term. In terms of encouraging, I think Mr. Pacheco, what you said about good developers versus bad developers, I don't want to set up a situation where someone in town, a developer in town, is receiving additional scrutiny because they are following the bylaw, which only encourages. I would encourage you, if you wish to strengthen this, to require it so that every developer is treated equally and fairly. And so that we're not creating separate classes of people who receive additional scrutiny from our elected and appointed officials here in town. Again, I think there's some other language like that later on. I think the more likely than not to be impacted language is extremely broad and leaves a lot of room for interpretation. So I would just encourage you to look back at this and see if those can be tightened up a little bit. And then lastly, Ms. Alman asked if you presented this to the planning board, and they said no. You said no. In the second paragraph, where you justify why you're moving this forward, you say that you're concerned that the planning board doesn't have the tools that they need to ensure that these projects don't overwhelm their surrounding neighbors. Has the planning board asked for these tools? Is this something that has been woefully overlooked and is desperately needed, and they just haven't expressed it to us?
So that section you're reading from right now, we'll start there with the planning board. That was there, and the last go around, we did receive a 3-2 approval from the planning board. And I can tell you that the reason we didn't get one of the 2 no votes was because of the stipulating of the 700 feet on the notice. So as to how the planning board feels about this, we are going to the planning board. It's just that we are on for the 24th, which is the next available meeting. We try to get on for the, whatever it was, the 13th. And we are going to the Board of Selectmen the following Tuesday. When we went last time to the planning board, that language is not a concern of theirs. In fact, again, for this incarnation of it, we've now received the full support of the Energy Commission, which we did not before. I have met one-on-one with 3 members of the planning board now going into this meeting coming up. And they will speak their minds at the meeting, but that section did not come up. As to your concerns about the notification, again, last time around, we did put 700 feet as a stipulation, and that was a problem for a lot of folks because it's nowhere else in the bylaw, and I hope in the future it is elsewhere in the bylaw. I think it should be some sort of a sliding scale throughout the bylaw, but that's not why I'm here. But what we did want to do, and in meeting with planning staff, and it was actually a member of staff who came up with this idea, you can't say 700, but let's say, hey, can you do the right thing? Now, as far as more scrutiny goes, if I'm a planning board member, yeah, I would look at that and say, why didn't you at least try to send the letter? But another planning board member might say, I don't really care. So it doesn't necessarily, it invites more scrutiny, I think, if you think like I'm thinking. But you're just following the bylaw. To the letter of the bylaw, no, you don't have to do it. But it's a signal to a developer that we care about the residents as much as we care about getting this solar projects done. And we do care about getting the solar project done. So does that answer the question?
I mean, I suppose I still think it's overly vague and leaves a lot of room for interpretation. And if and it also lends itself to the changing priorities, I guess, of the planning board, which is an elected office in town. I think it's to say that a property is more likely than not to be impacted is a very low standard, and so I think that needs to be tightened up.
But the purpose of the bylaw, as it is now, is to minimize the impact of solar facilities on the character of neighborhoods, on property values, on the scenic, historic, and environmental resources of the town, and to protect health and safety while allowing solar energy technology to be utilized. I would say to that, well, what do all those things mean? That's kind of vague. Do you see what I'm saying? We're just hearkening back to what's already in the bylaw. And if this is accepted as impact.
I get that. I do think that language is also vague. I was not a member of town meeting when that was passed.
Okay, that's fair.
I would have questioned that as well.
All right. I want to move on to Mr. LaFrere.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you for the information that you've shared so far. I appreciate that. Just some clarification. You said that it was unpreventable, for lack of a better word, that we can't stop, right, these fields, solar panels or what have you. But what about any restrictions on where they can go and where they cannot go? Because to try to minimize the impact of the character of neighborhoods, property values, on the scenic, historic, environmental resources, et cetera, that's going to be quite challenging in some locations. So I didn't know if you're restricted on where you can put these.
There is language in the bylaw that there are certain zones this can't go in at all.
Right.
So if you harken back to the very beginning of this, it talks about when site plan review is required, this kicks in. There's a lot of instances where it wouldn't be required, or it's just not allowed at all, so this would never come into play.
Yeah, we didn't include the full language of this particular section of the bylaw, but the part of the preamble lists when a site review is required, certain zones that it's not allowed. There's certain things where it's just simply by right that we could do. What obviously prompted this was concerns about solar fields being put over cranberry fields, and that comes under the state's SMART initiative program, which was originally designed to allow cranberry growers to be able to generate some extra income while keeping their bogs still operating and putting these tall panels up. And that was the initial concern. That, unfortunately, is something that we simply can't control, but again, is only allowed on cranberry bogs. If you, as a landowner, you say you've got 25 acres and you want to clear cut it and put a solar field on, is there a restriction on it? Does the town limit the amount of clear cutting you can do? That's just some of those things. Is it really? Unfortunately, no. And then it becomes of even county land, like along the highway or the state land where they've put these panels and stuff like that. So there's certain things we unfortunately can't. You as a private landowner who want to put a field up on your property, particularly if it's say like agricultural or commercial type property. It's tough for us to say no, and that's part of the state mandate of trying to encourage solar renewable energy.
Right. Thank you for that. So, if the first priority or what have you is, cranberry growers, their land, their acreage, what have you, it's a little concerning to me to see what we have at Exit 5 or 13 popping up all over town, where that really having an impact on the character of the town. So
And that's, again, it's not anything. We're only here in terms of ensuring the screening between residents who have to see it. And it makes no judgment one way or the other as to whether or not we should be putting them over cranberry bogs or on, there's floating solar arrays coming now. We're putting them on ponds. So that's a different purview. That's not in our purview. Yeah. This entire bylaw is about 18 pages, by the way. There's a lot in there.
Yeah, and we sympathize with your thought out here is that, yes, there's clearly a need for renewable energy in the world, and solar is the more popular thing right now, partly due to energy credits and tax credits and everything that are available to encourage it. Do you want to look at a big field across some certain areas? Not really, but as long as the state and the federal government is sort of encouraging these things, it's, we're kind of swimming up against the stream to try and say, all right, but only over here. And unfortunately, this bylaw is simply trying to protect or help minimize what we can control, which isn't everything, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
I had it on, sorry. Are there any other comments or questions from the committee?
Could I actually address the notification issue?
Sure.
Just for
sure.
just a brief second.
Keep it brief. We're
Absolutely.
pretty behind time here. So.
It would be my preference if we could do like 1,000, 2,000 feet. Absolutely, let everyone know. Maybe we can encourage the town to take it upon themselves to notify more abutters. I lived for several years in a suburb of Chicago where we had a monthly newsletter that was actually mailed to every household. And so I know that a lot of these things the town notice are available in the Old Colony or, is on the town website or whatever, but not everyone reads them, not everyone sees it. We don't do email blasts to people to let people know, hey, these things are coming up. A monthly newsletter that lets people know these things are coming up. You kind of look at it and read it. And so maybe we can't force a developer to do something, but maybe we can put it on ourselves to send emails out to people, to send a little notice. Hey,
conversation.
Right, exactly. Hey, there's a project coming up at this address. We're going to send flyers out to everybody just so you're notified. Come to the meeting. It doesn't hurt. Have an opinion. That's my 2 cents.
Go ahead, Mr. Delafin.
Yeah, just quickly, is there any way to write in there some flexibility for the future that says that the town could establish reasonable standards in that particular one? I don't know about Plymouth, and I don't know what the rules are here. I know in some other areas you're allowed to put something in that allows the town in the future, as this progresses, to put some reasonable standards in there for notification. I'm just wondering, is there any way to write that in, because this does not allow for that?
I would not do it. So we tried to do it within this. I think it needs to be a larger conversation, and talking with members of the planning board. It needs to be a larger conversation, speaking with some of the members of the Board of Selectmen. The larger conversation, it really isn't something that we should, if we put it in here, it's only about solar. That was a problem last time. That's why we're just encouraging it. But this is healthy. We're talking about it right now. So I bet you this will be something that the planning board's talking about in the future.
Well, and the great thing about the town government that we have right now is we can always amend our bylaws. We can bring motions before the town meeting, and we can vote to expand those notification areas. Right now, I think there's a little pushback in terms of the standard that basically everyone uses is 300 feet. And the AG might have a problem if we try and expand it. But, if we as a town make the effort, hey, you know what, we're going to change our bylaws to make it more flexible, increase those distances, let more people know, then we've got a force behind us that we can do it.
I was basically referring to the notification, not to the...
Yes, no, exactly.
You can always amend a future bylaw, or you can always amend the bylaw in the future if that's the pleasure of town meeting, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you both for coming in, and I'm sure we'll see you again before spring town meeting, because I know that as with the last time you guys went through this, you went through a few iterations as you made your way through planning and energy and the select board, so. All right, there you go. All right, moving on, we're going to jump into the Charter Review Committee update. Mr. Golden, if you have a moment.
I think folks are pretty done listening to me tonight, but I will say that the Charter Review continues. We're meeting, our next meeting is next Tuesday in the Roadblock Room at 6 p.m. We're continuing our work on Chapter 2, and I anticipate that we're going to add some additional meetings in the at the end of January and at least into February in order to regain control of our schedule. So I look forward to folks sending in input our way or attending our meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Golden. I couldn't quite hear you. Your meeting is next Tuesday, or is it tomorrow?
Next Tuesday, that would be doing my math right, that would be the 16th.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right.
Question real quick.
Mr. Lynch.
Yeah, Mr. Golden, question. I know you folks are changing, or you're suggesting changes that we, the town meeting, will eventually vote on. Can we, I mean, there must be some sort of a preview of the changes that we could already look at, and if you just could tell us that, please.
Yeah, so all of the changes that we are recommending will need to be approved by town meeting and ultimately through the state legislature. We've committed to sending chapters once completed to the town manager and the town council in order to have those reviewed. In terms of receiving those edits in advance, I would encourage you to reach out to me via email, and I can connect you with our clerk and our dedicated staff member who can help get you those edits to this point.
Thank you. Mr. Costello, a little legislative weather update, I guess.
Yeah, this will be quick. The Legislative Oversight Committee, quick update. Unfortunately, there's not much to report. We had 2 meetings scheduled over the course of the last month. The meeting on 12/18, we canceled due to the windstorm we had, and a large majority of the town was without power, and other boards and committees canceled. So we canceled that evening. And then the second meeting would have coincidentally have been for this evening. So we put that on hold so that I could be here and join my fellow COPC members. But we have rescheduled our meeting. We're on for January 22nd. So 2 weeks from this evening, we'll be back on track, and we'll have a standardized meeting every month going forward. But that's all I have to report on any type of new business with the Legislative Oversight Committee. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Unless there's any objections, when I did type up this agenda, I did put another committee update after the meeting minutes approval. I would just assume keep all of the subcommittee updates all kind of in a row unless there's an objection. And seeing none, Mr. LaFrere, if you don't mind, give us a handbook update.
Sure, thank you. So we are scheduled this week on the 11th, which is Thursday at 7 p.m. here in the Cranberry Room. The agenda has been posted and is now makes it official. So we'll be meeting from 7 to 8 just to do it a kickoff, and you know who you are, who will be there. So appreciate it. That's all I have. Thanks.
Excellent. I look forward to a packed room. Mr. Hutchinson.
Can I ask a question real quick about the handbook?
Sure.
As it turns out, the Charter Review Committee is entertaining an idea of a handbook for the charter. And Alan and Larry Pizer and I are discussing that. And I wondered whether you had targeted an audience specifically for the work that you're doing?
Well, I think it's all town meeting members.
But not the general public?
Um,
Well,
I
say,
think
can
that
call.
the scope,
Yeah.
we need to have the first kind of handbook meeting first, but if you look at our town meeting handbook, it's targeted to town meeting members. So I don't know why it would defer from that. We're not looking to rewrite the book here, but just to clean up and update some of the stale language that's in there, I would think. But again, they haven't had their first meeting yet.
Alan, do you have,
Well, I would just add to what Mr. Hutchinson is bringing up. As we are going through the charter, we're doing very much the same thing. We're streamlining it. We're getting rid of redundancies. We're trying to make it a simpler document. But we also want to have a place where town meeting members and town residents can go to get maybe some backup material that's not going to now appear in the charter if some of our changes are passed. So we may not be using the right term, town meeting handbook. There might be an intermediate term that catalog. It could be. We haven't come up with it, quite honestly. So I guess Mr. Hutchinson sort of surprised me, but I think he's right on point. This is the place to ask, Mr. LaFerry, if what they hope to do, and maybe in a future meeting down the line, not too far from now, maybe we could coordinate some things.
yeah, I'll just give you a call and we'll discuss. Thank you.
Okay. The only other thing that I would point out there is you're talking about something that's going to be voted on by voters and something that's being done by the COPC. So at some point, voters, but town meeting, anything in the charter that might change. So I just bear that in mind when we're kind of working together at the same time. I think it's a great idea so that everything's kind of succinct. But, it does I think there does need to be a little bit of independency, just because if something gets not voted upon, if say town meeting goes line by line through the charter changes, I don't want to create a hiccup. You know what I mean?
No, it's a great point. And I don't think at this stage we're asking to do that, but I just think we wanted to make sure everyone's aware that if some of these things happen, we want to have backup so that the average person can find out what the charter is saying.
Sure.
And we thought it might be one of the best places would be somewhere in that handbook.
The easy explanation, though, is that there is a school of thought about the charter that it ought to be skeletal, and that any implications, and that any Commonwealth law that's currently included in it, and any context that might relate to that Commonwealth law be in a handbook. And so it becomes a much more official, if you will, level of a document, because it's bound to the charter itself.
Sure. Okay. No, I appreciate the explanation. I think there's definitely work to be done together. So, but I just wanted to put that one word of advice out there. Okay. Thank you, Ms. LaFleur. Is there anything else you need to add? No. Okay. Then moving on, Pat, I'm going to hand it over to you for the meeting minutes approval.
All right, I would like a motion to accept the Committee of Precinct Chairs minutes for the meeting of 12/11/23.
So moved.
So moved.
Who seconded? All right.
Call the roll. Does that make it easier? Or do you
Just one,
Okay. I'll call the roll.
just one question, Chairman.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Is this the time to make some quick changes? I apologize. I should have.
I forgot discussion.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it's on me. I should have reached out, Pat. A couple of real minor things, if you don't mind. I was actually in person. I know this sounds petty, but I was in person last time and not remote.
Okay.
And mathematically, the vote we were talking about a little earlier, just the math doesn't line up. But I know that's, again, petty. But if you could just address those, I think I'd be fine with it.
The math on what?
Yeah, on the impact fees in that paragraph, if you go here, there's actually, I believe, 10 yeses. And I believe down here it lists it. Oh.
Yeah, that was.
So I'm looking at minutes that Did you
didn't get
resend these minutes?
I sent the corrected minutes, yes.
Okay, so the corrected minutes do have the vote.
Oh, very good
correct,
then.
but they still have you as remote, so I would
amend my motion
There we
to
go.
move with the corrections.
All right.
I look for a second on that. Second by Mr. Delafield.
Oh, okay. Did Joe have a question? Are you seconding?
Yep. Okay.
All right.
I will call for the roll. Precinct 1, absent. Precinct 2, yes. Precinct 3.
Abstain.
Abstain. Precinct 4.
Yes.
Precinct 5.
Abstain.
Precinct 6.
Yes.
Precinct 7.
Yes.
Precinct 8.
Yes.
Precinct 9. Not here. Precinct 10.
Precinct 10, yes.
Precinct 11.
Precinct 11, yes.
Precinct 12.
Yes.
Precinct 13.
Yes.
Precinct 14.
Yes.
Precinct 15.
Yes.
Precinct 16.
Yes.
Precinct 17.
Yes.
And Precinct 18.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on, as you remember, we amended the agenda, so we will be doing old and new business next. Is there any old business to come before? Mr. McKay.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the litter bylaw. Actually, for those of you, everybody here knows what happened at the Fall Town meeting. Spent a lot of time talking about things that are related to litter in the town. One of the first articles we talked about was the blight and nuisance bylaw that was on the table, and that also had to do with litter. And of course, that failed to pass. We also passed money to be spent on taking graffiti out of Holmes Park, and that was a $10,000 expense. And then we spent a lot of time talking on whether we should ban nips or not in town, because that's a, quote, litter problem. And in fact, as you know, that's still being talked about because we have an election coming up, or actually in process, finishing up on Saturday. So after the town meeting, I said, why don't I take a look at the bylaw and see what litter really is? So there's a bylaw called Bylaw 77 that's titled Graffiti and Litter. So I said, oh, that's nice. So I looked at Article 77, or Bylaw 77, and it does talk about graffiti, but it didn't talk about litter. So I said, gee, that's really strange. We should have a bylaw that's named Graffiti and Litter and talk about graffiti and talk about litter. So I did a little homework, and I came up with a proposal to change Bylaw 77 to be called Graffiti, Fly Posting, and Litter, and I distributed that to everybody I could think of, including town meeting members, and multiple times to town meeting members if they served on another board or committee like this. And what I did after my research is I, particularly with litter, because there was no mention of litter, I stole wording from the state to get the definition of what litter is, because we have to define litter within the state requirements. And I also took a look at several other cities and towns in Massachusetts and outside of Massachusetts to further see if there was anything we were missing as a town. And so I came up with the proposal to change Bylaw 77 to call it Graffiti, Fly Posting, and Litter, and I've given that to everybody in the room at least once. We're now trying to put it on the town as an agenda item for a town meeting in the spring. And we've got to get it on the table and endorsed by the 2nd of February. And I've got a lot of people that are willing to endorse it, but most of them are local and, in my opinion, focused groups. And so what I wanted to do is talk about it here, because I want to get the endorsement of this group so it looks like it's a town-wide initiative to get this thing done. And I think if we get that and we can agree on what the wording is, we won't have any issues at town meeting. So I'd like to open it up for questions. I assume everybody has read the proposed bylaw.
Well, first, before we do that, a couple of things here. One, I know that I'm going to speak for myself. I'm not going to speak for the chair who's not here. But I think when we're sending out things that we want to add to a meeting, it should go through the chair or the vice chair to get to the COPC. I wasn't sure who you had sent it to because I was blind copied on it, which is also why I didn't put it on as an agenda item. I'm just a procedural thing, that's all, because I'm not sure who may have received it here, who may not have. The other item to this, I believe that we had, when you spoke about this before us, I thought that there was some discussion, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you were going to bring it before your precinct for a vote.
Bring it where?
It was either 2 months ago, or it was the last time that this was, or last month when we spoke about this. I can't remember.
Well, I talked about it at Precinct 8, and I talked about it recently at another precinct meeting, where it all began. And,
so you heard it.
And in fact, he gave us the reasoning why the litter was not mentioned.
Right. That was, I believe you spoke about that at the last COPC meeting here as well in December.
Right. So we solved that mystery because that was something I wondered about.
So so did you take this to a vote at your precinct by any chance?
No, we didn't, and we didn't take it to a vote at the precinct meeting I attended before because my intent was to get it as a town-wide consensus or not, rather than have it, this is a proposal put on the table by Cedarville or Central Plymouth or North Plymouth, so I wanted to be a town-wide effort.
Okay, and then I guess kind of just, so this is, you're looking for this for the spring special because of the,
special,
yeah.
yes.
And then, so I guess it still needs to be run, has this language been run by town council yet?
Yeah, initially, the initial one was run, and she has a copy in her hand now to look at this. Even at the last meeting, at every meeting I've been to, everybody has made some comments, and so I didn't want to do a final legal review until I got everybody's comments. So that's why the first thing I want to do here is see if anybody has any comments.
All right, then I will entertain any questions that COPC members may have.
I've got one
Mr. Arienti?
I've got one question. It's not about the what's included in it. I agree with it. Do we have the authority, since it wasn't on the agenda, to take any action like this at the meeting tonight?
I do not believe that we can take any action on voting on this, as this is a new item. Right, correct. Right. Mr. Lynch?
Yeah, real quick, I understand, thank you, Mr. Golden. One time I did this, bring up new business and tried to get a vote, and he says you can't do that unless it's on the agenda.
Correct.
That's fine. My question to you, Mr. Parliamentarian, maybe Mr. Golden, you can back him up. Can we get some sort of straw poll vote or something? I'm just asking that as clarification. Now, Wrestling is shaking his head no, and I want to know very clearly, I realize it's not a legal, we'll call it vote here, but can we get kind of like a straw poll saying, yeah, I support it?
Well, I think that's what discussion is.
Well, that's what I'm asking, though. Can we get a, quote, straw poll?
Well, right. There's going to be no vote on this. I'm going to say that right now, but I will allow discussion, and maybe you can get from inference how people feel.
So really prime the pump and simply say, well, I support this tremendously. First of all, because the person who is proposing it, we're talking Mr. McKay, tremendous amount of integrity right there, and he does fantastic research. So, in first blush, I will say yes. Thank you.
Okay. Are
Then
there any other questions?
What I'd like to do is ask this body for a suggestion. To get this on the special town meeting in the spring, there's only two ways you can go, is to get a public body to give you their endorsement or a citizen's petition. Citizen's petition requires 100 signatures, which I guess I could do in the next week or so if it was necessary. But I'd rather get a public body to say, yes, is there a public body you can suggest I can go to? because I thought I could go to this one. So I've been postponing asking other people, and I didn't know because I thought it was going to be on the agenda, and it's not on the agenda.
Well, the only thing that I can suggest is that if this is, going to be put forward by you as a, that you want the COPC to put this forward as a document, is this the final? I've seen a couple iterations of it, so is this one that you sent the final one that you wanted to be voted upon?
Yes.
So then my suggestion would be that I speak with the chair for, we do have, well, yet to be decided, but we do have one more meeting in January scheduled, our typical Thursday meeting, and then that would be where it would be an agenda item to be voted upon, but we can't vote upon this tonight.
Okay, so I thought this was going to be the January meeting, but we're having 2 meetings in January?
So the way that our meeting structure is that we have one meeting a month and an option for a second meeting. Last month, we did have a motion that was put forth, I believe it was by Ms. Pratt, where we were going to bring up, and we voted upon it, and it carried, which is the one that we just looked over the minutes. It was like 10 in favor, to look at the impact fees. Mr. Arianti did some homework on that. We did have to schedule a meeting. Once the meeting is scheduled, we were going to hold it. Obviously, we pulled back on the impact fees language this evening, but that was the catalyst for this meeting tonight, was originally the impact fee vote that happened because we were, at the time, and the way the vote was stated, as you saw, it was forced to get it on the spring town meeting. But as you saw tonight during discussion, we're not moving forward with that. So there's still the availability, which is a discussion item that we move towards the end of the January meeting. Otherwise, yes, that would be the last opportunity. Ms. Adelman.
I would like to make a motion to meet on January 24th and have this item as an agenda.
Well, we are going to be discussing our next meeting after, and we can have a discussion on the next meeting date after we get through all the new business and public comment, because that's where you might have missed it. In the beginning, we moved.
Right.
We moved that towards the end.
So can I make a motion if we have a meeting on the 24th that this be on the agenda?
We can discuss that when we get to the meeting, but I don't know, okay. And maybe Pompey, you can we trying to look it up as we speak, but yeah. All right.
Mr. Chairman, isn't our regular scheduled meeting, wouldn't that be the 18th, the third Thursday?
Yes, it is I was going to correct that when we got to that topic, but yes, you are correct.
All
yes.
Right. I don't know where I got the 24th.
Can I ask a question that, in terms of how to go forward here? If I go to a local precinct meeting and they put their endorsement on it, so I don't have to go through the 100 signatures for a citizen's petition, then come back to this board later on in the month and then ask you to also endorse it? Does that make sense?
That you can have everybody endorse it as far as I'm concerned, when you come back here. But I think the biggest thing right now is if this is the final language, that we get it out to all of the committee of precinct chairs. Again, I wasn't sure who received it, so that's why I didn't comment on it. And I think I commented back to you, we'll bring it up during new and old business. But if it gets out to the COPC chairs through the chair or the vice chair, I don't see why it can't be a voted upon agenda item for the end of the month or the 18th.
Can we get a feel and take Mr. Lynch's suggestion and do a straw poll?
No. No. We cannot vote. We are not voting. We're not straw polling. We're not raising our hands. But again, like I said, you may speak to what we're the topic, and people can infer what they want. But there is going to be no vote on this evening.
Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Lynch.
Yeah, real quick. In article, either 100 signatures from citizens or from a committee. Is that correct, Mr. McKay? From a committee.
You can get a committee of 2 if they're...
Really? Well, my question would be, he's going back, let's say, to his caucus. Would that be considered a committee? My guess would be no.
No, it is.
Sure?
Just
double checking.
When he presented to his caucus, if they
Town
wanted
entity.
to
Okay,
vote
thank you.
and push forward, that would be fine.
Called it a committee.
All right. All right. Any other old or new business? Mr. LaFrari.
I had a resident in my precinct last minute hand me a sheet of paper about increased gallons of wastewater being pumped out of the sewage treatment plant in Camelot Park. His concern is that this could have a negative impact on the Eel River watershed. So he had informed me that there was a petition going around. And I haven't brought this to my town meeting members in my precinct yet, but I just wanted to let everyone know here. And I didn't know if this was public knowledge, if anyone's heard about this, or I was surprised when I received it. So it's...
If there's any sort of, again, if there's any sort of documents that need to be looked at by the chair or to continue on to the, to continue on to the town meeting members, that I think that would be appropriate to go through her or myself.
Okay.
Can you just repeat, increased gallons of water being pumped out of where?
The wastewater treatment plant down in Camelot Park.
Mr. Begley, I apologize. I didn't see that your hand was raised. Please go ahead.
Can I actually comment on the litter bylaw thing?
Sure.
Okay, that's why I was up. All right.
I apologize. I didn't see you earlier.
That's all right. You had a lot going on there. Just the one thing I had sort of for George when I was reading through this was I honestly didn't know what fly posting was until I read this, and makes a lot of sense. But you say that fly posting is a subset of graffiti, so in that spirit of like keeping things succinct and keeping things nice and clean when we're talking about bylaws and charters, I think you're redundant with that language with fly posting versus what you added to graffiti A, the first line, kind of covered it right there. I would suggest taking out that fly posting as a header. If it's a subset of graffiti, it's already covered. I'm just thinking more along the lines of trying to keep the language as clean as possible. We heard like the charter review and the handbook as a similar sort of mandate that they're working under. So in the spirit of the bylaws, the same review, I would just suggest cleaning that up a bit.
And I agree. That'll go out tonight.
Make sure it goes through the chair, please. Okay. Any other, Mr. Brewster?
Yes, I just have some concerns, as many of my constituents do, about the taxes. We're looking at using our unused tax levy again and looking at that override again. I'd like this body to start thinking about how we can be involved in the budgetary process, whether we have a committee or something, but we all need to talk to our select board and make them known that the town is very concerned about this. It's just, I had one constituent come up to me and say that their tax bill went up $2,000 this year, and it's something we got to look at, and I just have deep concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Brewster. Any other old and new business either? Mr. Lynch.
Yeah, real quick, Pat, I can give you this quote a little bit later on, but I'll say it right now. I have 4 items right here. I'm just reeling them off real quick so they're entered into the record. But basically, an informed electorate is an active electorate. And on that note, I'm just going to say these ideas, which actually dovetails into Mr. Bulletin's idea of going out to meet the people. I know Mr. Quintal also said that's on the select board. I had this idea years ago. It's called Traveling Town Meeting. And I would like to draft something, give it to the chair, and hopefully include it as a discussion item in next month's next meeting. The other one was really what these solar panel folks were talking about, a newsletter. I really, really believe that townspeople are dying for news, not on the town website, and it's difficult to kind of like keep up with the Plymouth Independent, but have a newsletter called Town Meeting Update. How often that is put out, that depends on how much is happening. The next item would be, Mr. Brindisi is not here, but I was hoping that maybe, there might be some thought on something called a state of the town address. And I thought about this a while back, and a couple of times a year, have it at Memorial Hall, have it be televised, have the town present where we are at twice a year. So I would, again, like to go in all three ideas so far. I'd like to present, if possible, at the next meeting. And the last one, Mr. Tavares, you'll recognize this one, and that is, again, to let people know who we are. The July 4th parade, 6 months away. I propose that at some point that, we kind of get ourselves motivated to march in that parade, even pony up some money to march in that parade, and let the people know who we are. And so I just want to throw that up as new business and like to maybe hopefully speak on that at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Tugging at the heartstrings with the 4th of July. I got you. Good. Well played. Is there any other old and new business? Seeing none, I'm going to go on to the best topic of all time, which is our next meeting, public comment. Mr. Lynch, are you coming up here for public comment? Okay.
Now, I changed chairs because I was here last time, public comment, talking about the accessory dwelling units. And I really think it's going to be a very, very much of a hot-button item. And so I would like to be able to have you folks, again, in the front of your mind, as well as the back, is to poll your constituents and see and try to explain it. I've done the best I can. And out of all the people I've actually polled, 2 wanted more information. The majority, overwhelming majority, were against it, and only 1 was for it, and that was a town meeting member. So I caution you to consider what we're going to be doing in April. We'll be voting for something that's going to affect the entire town, and if we don't find out what they're actually, what their thoughts are, then we might do them a disservice. And one last little bit is that it was commented on that I gave misinformation last time during public comment. And I went before a town official and I said, is this misinformation? He said, no. And the misinformation, I think it was I said that it's by right. Anyone in a single-family residential neighborhood, by right, can put in an apartment, either attached to their house or detached. And perhaps the misinformation was I didn't say as long as they follow the town regulations. But it is by right. So that is not by misinformation. And the unfortunate part, and Mr. Bulletin said the state government is going to do everything and anything to basically promote housing in some sort. So therefore, they lowered the actual voting bar. Instead of 2/3, which is a zoning bylaw that we're going to be voting on in April, instead of 2/3, now it's only a simple majority. And that is where it's going to get sticky, ladies and gentlemen. And then a comment tonight, the state government is behind 200,000 housing units. Maybe perhaps an idea that some people came up with up in the State House is like, well, let's do accessory dwelling units, apartments in single-family residential neighborhoods, and de facto turning them into multifamily residential neighborhoods. So I just throw that out, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Is there any other public comment? No. As I look to the 2. Okay. So then we will now get to the discussion of our next meeting. The next meeting is scheduled for January 18th, 7 o'clock right here. That's the typical monthly meeting that we have on the third Thursday. I think that we have, I'm going to open it up for, discussion, but I think that there is a case for an article to be looked at during this meeting. I also think that we'll get some updates from some of the other subcommittees as we're moving along here. But as far as I'm concerned, that's our meeting that we're supposed to be holding. So I'd like to see it go forward. Mr. Brewster, discussion.
I move that we keep the meeting as posted and scheduled.
So moved by Mr. Brewster, seconded by Claire. Discussion.
18th.
The 18th, the third Thursday. Yep. Discussion. Seeing and hearing none. Oh. Yes, Ms. LaFrere, if you want to send, while Catherine's out of town, if you want to send me any information that you have and the subject, I'll look to include it for the agenda. And that goes true for everybody sitting here. If there's something that you'd like to see on the agenda, please send along. You may send it to Catherine, but also perhaps if you could email me also, just because she is out of town. I don't know what her email ability is. I think that I think it should go through the chair and go through the vice chair. So just send it to me. Yeah, or myself and Catherine. Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Point of order, Matt.
Oh, sorry, their mics were off. I will repeat that very briefly. Any agenda items, if there's any suggestions, please send them to Catherine and myself while she's out of the country. I don't know what her email availability is to put. I think she's back for the next meeting, but I don't know when she'll be able to see things. But also, if there's ever any documentation that you would like to have go before the COPC, and in most cases we also send it along to all town meeting members, that should really go through the chair and not sent to the rest of the body directly. Just it keeps it cleaner. And it keeps it neater, and I think that we can all abide by that. It's pretty easy to do. All right, so we need to call for the vote unless there's more discussion on this. Hearing none. Precinct 1, absent. Precinct 2, yes. Precinct 3.
Abstain.
Abstain. Precinct 4.
Yes.
Precinct 5.
Yes.
Precinct 6.
Yes.
Precinct 7.
Yes.
Precinct 8.
Yes.
Precinct 9, absent. Precinct 10.
Precinct 10, yes.
Precinct 11.
Precinct 11, yes.
Precinct 12.
Yes.
Precinct 13.
Yes.
Precinct 14.
Yes.
Precinct 15.
Yes.
Precinct 16.
Yes.
Precinct 17.
Yes.
And Precinct 18.
Yes.
Okay, so the next meeting will be the 18th, 7 o'clock, same location as we are this evening. And I think we all know what we're looking for now.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Mr. Brewster. Can I get a second? Second, second by Pompey. All those in favor? There we go. All right, good night, and thank you.
Okay.